I want to begin today with the statement, underneath, around, above, are the everlasting arms of love. We talked yesterday about the fact that you are loved, and for the need to let it in. Another way you might look at letting in the Father's love is to let yourself down into it, the way a babe would lean into and relax into the underlying arms of his mother or father. It's not work. It's the absence of effort that lets you down into your safety net. The Father's love is a safety net. You could look at it that way. Now, there are some children that you pick up and they squirm. Well, to some degree or another, all of you are squirmers. Anything to get up and get about doing something, becoming something, being something. Instead of being at peace, instead of being in the constant state of feeling safe. And the wonderful thing is that when you dare to let down, to let go, to relax into this safety net, except that it's more than a net, it's the arms of love, the arms of caring. You don't find yourself doing nothing. You find yourself inspired to be, but every aspect of what you're being doesn't arise out of fear. It isn't being this or being that to avoid disaster or hurt. And when your being, I will say being in the world, arises out of that place, everything you do blends with everything else and blesses everything else. And so you become what you would recognize and call a meaningful presence. But again, your presence in the world is not a result of or a reaction to fear. Bursting the bubble that we were speaking about yesterday, or finding it breaking up. In other words, awakening is the easiest thing you will ever do, because it happens when you're not only doing the least, it happens when you're doing nothing. And that's why it seems so difficult, because it seems almost impossible to do nothing. You are so conditioned to achieve and conquer and make something of yourself that it flies right in the face of all of your education. It also flies right in the face of everything you feel when you feel tiny. Because when you feel tiny, you feel vulnerable. And if you feel vulnerable, you feel called upon to do something to protect yourself. And so doing nothing can seem to be the most dangerous thing you could ever do, and of course the most irresponsible, as I mentioned yesterday. When you're in that safety net, when you have let go into the underlying, not temporary, but everlasting arms of love, of the Father, of God, you will find, as Paul is doing right now, that you will use words and you will relate to each other. But the words you use will remind everyone else of the truth. It will put into the air, you might say, a vocabulary of salvation instead of the vocabulary of economics, the vocabulary of self-protection, the vocabulary of war, the vocabulary of conflict. It puts a new vocabulary in the air when I am with you, either in this fashion or directly through the very center of you. I'm always providing you with a vocabulary different from the one you're used to using out of habit. And the new vocabulary allows you to think in a new way, even though I have yesterday promoted not thinking, and have suggested that, or made the absolute statement, that thinking is what the veil is constituted of between you and your being awake. But you are going to use a vocabulary, and you are going to think until you've put it down. And although thinking, as I said yesterday, is not creative, it doesn't cause anything. It can't make people's arms fall off. It can't make a tree appear out of nothing in the yard. Thinking does have a very definite effect. But the only place it has an effect is in your own mind. And your thinking creates images for you that either free you or bind you. You can either think with the ego in a defensive posture, or we could say you can think with God. When you have a vocabulary that identifies you truly as a divine presence, and if you have a vocabulary and images, like the bubble, that help you to see more clearly that you're trapped by the flimsiest of boundaries, then you do not bring into play as much self-defense. And the vocabulary you use does not deny God. Your vocabulary doesn't add soap to the bubble and extend its life. And the more you are thinking with God, the more you are in harmony with the truth at the level of your thinking, the easier it is for breakthrough to happen. So your thinking either binds you absolutely, or your thinking can be I will say, the significant absence of the ego, and therefore the significant absence of defense, meaning the bubble, and you are primed for breakthrough, inspiration. So, please understand that although thinking can't cause anything in terms of creation, it can bind you absolutely, and it does. Or, depending upon how closely it approximates the truth, it causes you to be defenseless enough to let the penetration of God, the penetration of the love that God is loving you with, to occur. You see? Most all of you have had the experience of a first love. And it was not an experience where you were interested in getting. You were full of something to give. You loved, you adored another. In other words, the door was open and the flow went through you and out. And if you will remember back to that experience, you will realize how beautiful the whole world looked. It wasn't just the object of your affection. Everyone looked better. The whole world looked better. No matter how horrible it looked better. What happened? Well, for some irrational reason, because love is never planned, for some irrational reason, you were willing to de-emphasize your commitment to your thoughts about the world, because something became more important than all your commitment to your thoughts about the world. And in the absence of that commitment, the world became a more lovely place. And you know what? You became a more lovely presence. It's an important thing to understand. The veil is like a transparency, like a sheet of glass that your thinking deposits marks on. In the beginning, you looked through the transparency and you saw the trees, or you saw what was out there. And then you said, gee whiz, some of these trees stay green all winter, and some of them become bare and ugly. I wish maybe that the ones that became bare and ugly would die or would be different. And you had a thought about the tree, and on the transparency of the window, marks began to appear, covering the tree. And as you began to have opinions and evaluations and judgments about what you saw, the glass became more marked. Until pretty soon, all you saw were the marks on the window. And you were no longer looking at what was there, really, originally. Even your positive thoughts, oh, I really like that tree, and a bunch of likable marks appeared on the window. Even your positive thoughts about things put marks on the transparency. And as a result, your good and bad thoughts, which you have lent commitment to, have separated you from a direct experience of what was there. Now, we could use a better example than a window. We could use the example of a pair of glasses. If the marks are on the glasses, then no matter where you turn your head, the marks associated with the view you're looking at will be what you see on the glasses. And waking up amounts to abandoning your commitment to your interpretations and evaluations and judgments, all of which are thoughts of one sort or another, so that you can see what's really there. Now, everybody at one time or another asks, what is my function? One way it could be said is that your function is to glorify God. And many of you could think, oh, that means I have to become a nun or a priest or a monk and sit in supplication and songs of praise with my attention constantly on my best concept of what God is. But a better way of looking at it is that your function is to be the transparency, for you to be the transparency for God. Because when you're the transparency, there's nothing blocking the direct expression of what God is being right there where you are, which is what causes you to be divine being. And how do you become a transparency for truth? How do you become a transparency for God? Not by becoming highly educated and not by studying lengthy religious books, but by daring to become still. Abandoning the thinking that puts the marks between you and your experience. Oh, that's going to make me really weird. I'm not going to fit in at all. I will become an outcast. Even if people stand in awe of me, I'll be an outcast. I certainly won't be treated like them, by them. Well, you know what? When you do that, when you let yourself become a transparency for truth, everybody's going to experience you as being more real, more grounded, easier to connect with. Well, of course, if that which was standing between you and the person you're with has become totally transparent, then you will be with them more totally than you were. You will be more present with them. You will behave differently with them. And in fact, you will be easier to get along with. Don't you all recognize genuineness when you see it? And don't you always feel comfortable in the presence of someone who's genuine? Well, they're being a transparency for truth. They're being a transparency for God. And you're not going to be any more weird than that. That's not weird at all. what I really want to convey here is that the more you allow yourself to be the transparency for God, the more you're glorifying God. But the practical experience of glorifying God is that everybody will experience you as being more genuine, more real, more meaningful. And that's the way the transformation of awakening is going to occur, because it's going to just seep into the world's daily experience in the gentlest of ways. It's not going to be an overthrow of anything. It's going to be more and more people recognizing in each other that there's nothing to be afraid of. Why? Because someone has started out by letting themselves relax into the underlying, everlasting arms of love, letting themselves have the experience of being loved, and as I've said a number of times, discovering that you're lovable. And in the discovery, at a level of knowing that you're lovable, you realize that you are innocent of anything. And in the discovery that you, in all of your unspecialness, are lovable and divinely innocent, you realize that your neighbor, in all of his or her unspecialness, is just like you. And the moment that recognition is there and is felt, you have extended love. And if you stay in that place, you will be experienced as genuine, as safe. And whether the other one can receive it fully or not, they at least know that you are not a threat. So now you have a little bit better understanding of thoughts, that although they're not creative, they can block your view of reality totally. And that can be a very devastating, well, it's inevitably a devastating experience, because it causes you to feel disconnected from reality. And to be disconnected from reality in your mind is to be out of your mind. And it is not comfortable to be insane. So thoughts have effects, but not on anything out there. Their effects are entirely on the thinker of the thoughts. And so, in practical terms, you need to start thinking better thoughts if you're going to be thinking at all. And in order to think better thoughts, you have to have a better vocabulary. And so go where you can find the better vocabulary. If it's books, find books that give you the better vocabulary. Or become still and connect with your guide and you will have the better vocabulary provided to you, so that you can think less defensively, so that you can think less judgmentally, so that you can think right in the face of an obtuse world thoughts that represent the truth and not the presentation, so that your mind is available, so that your mind, the volume of air that's inside the bubble, is available for the penetration of the air that's outside the bubble, because the defensive ego structure is weakened. You see? Perceptions won't change until new words are given to the situation. Misperceptions won't change until a new vocabulary provides you with the means of seeing that your misperception is not valuable, is not true. But until you have a truer way of thinking about it, you won't be able to abandon the misperception. So, there are things you need to know about thinking, and indeed, within your own mind and within your own awareness, your thinking does seem to be creative. But all it can create, whether it's positive thoughts or negative thoughts, are marks on the transparency that you're looking through that block you from looking through the transparency to see reality. But the marks are not actual, they're not real. They were not put there by God. They are absolutely imaginative. And when you make commitment to an imaginative error, you are, until you release it, bound by the misperception that results. So, you are going to have to start thinking differently about yourself, and you're going to have to start thinking differently about your neighbor. But thinking differently about your neighbor isn't going to change your neighbor. Thinking more truly about your neighbor is going to clean the window of your mind. Your mind. And then, as the day you fell in love for the first time, why, marvelous things will have happened to your neighbor. Why, your neighbor is so different. And you say, healing has occurred. My thoughts changed him. My thoughts changed her. Consciously directed prayer by means of thoughts changed my world. My thoughts are powerful. Well, yes, your thoughts are powerful. They can blind you or give you complete vision, depending upon whether they support ignorance or whether they reflect the truth. And when they reflect the truth, as I said, it means that you have come into better alignment with truth, and as a result, the defensive boundary weakens and truth itself can penetrate as a direct experience, transforming and renewing what? Your neighbor? No. Your mind. Quite some time ago, when someone asked what they could know about their body because healing was needed, I gave them what I called an authorization. And it goes like this: I authorize my body to release whatever is not necessary to its perfect functioning. And I withdraw any prior conscious or unconscious authorization to the contrary. Wow, one could say. I can authorize something. And when I make this statement, I am authorizing my body to heal itself. I have some power. Well, no, that isn't the case at all. But when you say, I authorize my body to release whatever is not necessary to its perfect functioning, you're not saying, my body is killing me. My body is at odds with me. My body is not my ally. You're not saying any of those things. And in effect, you're not saying and making commitment to that which demeans your body. When you say, I authorize my body to release whatever is not necessary to its perfect functioning, and I withdraw any prior conscious or unconscious authorization to the contrary,